You just never know when one of those moments is going to come along that you will never forget. One summer weekend, Sandy Becker and her husband, Jim, were planning a fun day at a popular amusement park with some of their friends. Not only was she very excited about many of the thrill rides, but because she knew her husband's co-worker, Mark, would be there as well. Sandy and Mark had always had a flirtatious relationship, but, as she was married, and he was usually involved with someone, it never went further than trying to see who could make the other blush harder. Mark had been Jim's friend way before they started working together. Often, Sandy would find herself lost in reveries about Mark. No wonder, the 34-year-old man was tall, with nice wide shoulders and incredibly strong hands. He had wavy black hair, and a set of green eyes that seemed to stare deep into Sandy's soul in a brief instant. She tried to regain her composure as her husband asked her opinion on their agenda. "Get a grip on, Sandy." She quickly sat down and grabbed a glass of wine. Sandy knew that she was very attractive, standing 5 feet 7 inches tall, with long, dark blonde hair, somniferous almond eyes. Her figure was beautiful. Even in her discreet work uniform, she was stunning. Although she didn't like the idea of cheating, and had always turned down any propositions, she couldn't help but secretly fantasize about Mark. Sandy continued to think about the handsome man. She did not know why she was turned on so much by him, but her arousal was beginning to reach epic proportions. "It's all set, dear." They all thought it would be a good idea. Her husband snapped her back to reality. "Too bad Mark is not going to make it, though. It certainly won't be the same without him." Sandy couldn't hide the disappointment in her voice. "What happened?" "He has to look after his brother Josh," Jim explained. "Oh, please," complained the lithe, throwing her long hair over her shoulder, eyes glowering. "Mark won't be able to make it because he has to take care of his younger brother." "You don't have to be mean, dear. Josh is just a kid trying to find his own space," retorted Jim. "Mark's parents are busy this weekend and asked him for a hand." "He is a 19-year-old. That's more like it." Sandy pouted. "I'm sure there is something we can do to free him from that burden. Come to think about it." Her husband seemed to have an idea. "What if Josh joins us? I'm sure he would be thrilled to go. That would keep him busy and out of trouble. What do you think, dear?" "You have got to be kidding me." Sandy lifted her eyes, chin jutted. She couldn't stand the sight of the obnoxious kid, but that was the only way she would be able to meet Mark, and maybe try something more. She had an expression of grudging acceptance of her husband's latest crazy assignment, babysitting boy. Walking away muttering, Jim's words could be heard echoing down the hall. "Calling back, we are leaving at 9 am sharp, tomorrow, so be ready to go at 1:15 with your duffel bag packed. We're staying the day." Jim's eyes squinted in sardonic satisfaction. Asterisk following day star. Sandy stared at the landscape that filled the summer painting outside the car's window. At least she could enjoy the nice view. The heat waves flowed over, around and through everything, clutching them in its hot, clinging grasp. It was so bright that, at 9 o'clock in the morning, the asphalt appeared to be covered in a thin layer of water, reflecting the sunrays and casting halos of golden light all around. Leafy trees stood like weary sentinels, swaying in the gentle embrace of the warm breeze, their skin glimmering in the soft glow of the reflected light. Sandy felt a quiet affection for the scenery and the spell it was casting over her. She could really use some time under that hot sun, but that wouldn't be the case for her, she morosely thought. She was feeling a bit frisky and decided to wear a white dress. "Wow, dear. You really look beautiful when you wear that dress," her husband whispered. "Yes, I know, lover. That's the point. Make all those other guys jealous," she lied, smiling. She couldn't wait for Mark to check her out. He softly whispered to her, "I'll deal with you later." Soon after, the group arrived at their destination. The park seemed to be crowded, with lots of people enjoying themselves. They parked the car at one of the last remaining spots. And Sandy grabbed her husband's arm as they headed towards the entrance. "Hey, guys." Mark greeted his friends outside the main gate. He and his brother Josh had just arrived, as well. "Hi, Sandy." "Hi, Mark." She grinned, trying her best to hide her excitement. "Glad to see you made it." "Why, Mrs. Becker, you look lovely today." Josh interrupted, his eyebrows immediately raised. "Oh, great. The boy will never take his eyes off me the whole day. It's not my fault. I thought I was going to an amusement park to have some fun, not to a bizarre kindergarten." She thought. After exchanging pleasantries with each other, the adults finally headed for the main entrance. They paid the required fee at the entrance and decided to walk around the place first before choosing the rides to go on. The group intended to visit all the smaller attractions before heading to the major ones. Their first stop was something called the Pirate Ship. It was a suspended ship, swaying from one side to the other. The people on it were screaming and the group concluded it couldn't be that bad and decided to try it out. Next, they went to do the bumper rides and it was fun. Jim said he'd watch, so the rest of them went and rode the bumper cars while Sandy's hubby captured the moment on camera. The group were laughing and bumping into each other. The ride was too short though, the space wasn't enough for the cars and it was sort of an anticlimax. They moved on to the next attraction. Star. A couple of hours later, the group was ready to experience the main rides. They had decided to grab something light to eat, first. "Hey, Sandy." Josh approached the beautiful wife, while she headed to get something cool to drink. "Not now, kid," she quickly attempted to dismiss the eager boy, without showing the least sign of embarrassment. "And it's Mrs. Becker to you." "I thought we could skip the formalities," Josh insisted. "Considering how close you are to my brother. You seem to like him so much." "But of course I care about him," Sandy agreed. "He's very kind and sweet, more than I can say about you. So I say we stick to the formalities." "Oh, come on, I've seen the way you look at him." Josh interrupted the gorgeous wife. "Mark is a good-looking guy, I can understand how charming he can be, but you can't deny all the tension between the two of us." "Tension? Us?" Sandy was quite angry by his bold assertion, but couldn't help but start laughing out loud, almost hysterically. "You are a really fucked up kid. Do you even know what the expression means?" "Oh, of course. It's. Huh." The boy attempted a witty comeback, but decided to simply remain silent. "You know, kid." Sandy addressed him, after regaining her composure from all the laughter. "Even though you are nothing but a twisted, at least you have the guts to approach a woman, which is not something common nowadays, I'll give you that. However, don't embarrass yourself thinking you have the slight chance with me. When it comes to women, I certainly do a whole lot more than talking," he harshly stated, upset that she would always look down on him. "You may be calling me a kid and laughing now, but let's see who will be the one laughing when." Josh pushed his luck. "Excuse me?" Sandy's eyes turned red. The boy had gone too far. She couldn't believe his audacity. She remained self-confident, though, and decided to teach him a lesson. Josh wasn't expecting Sandy to be so straightforward nor blunt. He didn't know what to say and just lowered his gaze to the ground. "That's what I thought," Sandy smiled and walked away, having achieved her goal. Josh mumbled, after he was sure she couldn't hear him. Star. After several hours, the group of friends had taken her on every single ride in the park. Sandy was feeling so emboldened by this experience that she wanted to make her day a real thrill. As they were walking through the park, she had noticed a Japanese-style garden that was isolated from the main throng of people. She asked Mark to go there with her to relax from all the adrenaline they had been pumped up with, and catch up. So, Mark followed her in. They found a secluded hedge deep in the garden near a pond. There was a lamppost that was a little overgrown by the hedge as it faced the pond. No one was around them at the moment, so Mark stood there and leaned against the post, which gave him a relaxed stance while he gazed into the beautiful pond. Sandy stood right next to him. Mark couldn't believe what was happening. Here they were, in broad daylight, at a very crowded theme park, and she hugged his then and there. He was more nervous than her now about this thrill ride. He was so afraid that at any moment anyone could walk around that hedge and catch Jim's wife and his. Now she was in control of this ride for sure. It was such a turn-on for her to have such spontaneity in doing him like that. Mark was getting so much pleasure from this ride, much more than any of the ones we had been on all that day. Mark couldn't believe what was happening. Here they were, in broad daylight, at a very crowded theme park, and she hugged his. He was more nervous than her now about this thrill ride. He was so afraid that at any moment anyone could walk around that hedge and catch Jim's wife and his. Now she was in control of this ride for sure. It was such a turn-on for her to have such spontaneity in doing him like that. Mark was getting so much pleasure from this ride, much more than any of the ones we had been on all that day. When the thing he feared the most happened, a group of old ladies came strolling nearby where they could see the daring couple. Mark froze and immediately told Sandy what he had seen. She couldn't see them because she had her back to them. As soon as he told her, like a flash, she laid a big deep kiss on him. As group of women spied them, they assumed they were engaged in some heavy kissing and hugging. So, they decide to give them their space and move on out of sight. They had no idea what she was up to. Sandy could be fast on her feet when she wanted to. As soon as she realized that they were back alone again, she began to work his. All the while, Mark was still paranoid about being caught. Sandy had built up so much courage from all the thrill rides of the day that this one was no different to her. Maybe we should go to a more reserved place. Mark winked at her. Where? She devilishly smiled. How about the haunted mansion? He proposed. I like the idea. Meet me there in 15 minutes. Star. Sandy entered the mansion. The walls of the room were dark, blood-stained versions of their former selves, and it ran from the walls and began to spread across the floor toward them. The pavement had been replaced with cold, rusted metal grating that clanged with every step they took. Sandy stepped out of the room. The corridor outside was warm and dark. It stretched off to the left and right. It went down as well, the floor nothing more than rusty chain-link fencing over a black void. Vertigo threatened to topple her. She leant against the doorway for support. From some distant place, weird sounds could be heard, a grinding, squealing noise of metal in pain. The blonde wife stumbled out into the corridor. The walls were metal, bare and rusted in places, and coated with peeling paint in others. The setup looked very real to her. She turned to the right and set off down the hallway, the grating floor groaning beneath her feet. There were doors set into the walls at regular intervals, but none that she could open. They all seemed to be locked. Up ahead another corridor bisected the one Sandy was in. There was a squeaking noise as well, that rose and fell with regularity. It was getting steadily louder and, therefore, closer, but from which direction she couldn't tell. It just kept getting darker and darker. She reached the intersection of corridors and looked. Nothing to the left or right, and nothing straight ahead. Sandy returned to the intersection of the corridors to decide her best course of action. Maybe it wasn't the best idea to try her bold move in a place like this. This particular spot was very dark, almost pitch black. Suddenly, she felt the presence of someone. Mark? The blonde wife hesitated, clearly afraid. In the darkness, she couldn't distinguish any facial features. But she noticed Mark nodding, as he pulled her close to him and started kissing her. God! You scared the shit out of me. Sandy laughed, relieved. Are you sure no one is gonna show around here? She teased him. Can you guess what happens next? At last, Sandy got up, found her way out of the dark maze. Outside, the day was in full swing. Nobody seemed to miss her, to her relief. She began making the rounds again, making small talk. 20 minutes later, Mark came over to her and chatted with her and her husband as if nothing had happened between them. Sandy was feeling very guilty about what happened, but couldn't help but smile at what she was now considering her adventure. Soon, though, all that culpable emotion would be past her. Another thought came to her and her smile deepened and she even let out a little chuckle to herself. "Hey, big boy." The wife teased Mark as soon as her husband left them alone. "Sorry about that, Sandy," Mark apologized. "I didn't mean to leave you waiting there." "Yeah, right." She laughed. "I mean it," Mark continued. "It was just that Josh disappeared and I had to look for him." What? Sandy turned pale. "You weren't there at all." "Hey, guys." Jim interrupted the conversation, before Mark could answer. "You won't believe what Josh just told me." "Come on, Josh, tell them." "Well, look what I found." The boy retrieved the item in question from his back pocket. Sandy was at a loss for feelings, she immediately recognized her own. The beautiful wife thought the man in the mansion was Mark, but it was his little brother. Suddenly, Sandy felt sick. "Can you imagine it, dear?" Jim asked his wife, laughing. "She must be very easy, to put it nicely." Little did Jim know that the girl he was referring to was no one other than his own wife. The guys all laughed, while Sandy faked a smile. "Why don't we all go to the mansion?" Jim suggested, giggling. "Maybe we get to see something like that again." "I don't think it's such a good idea." Sandy tried to dissuade her husband. "Nonsense, dear." Jim gathered the group of friends and headed for the attraction, waving for his wife to follow the group. "It will be fun." Sandy turned pale and involuntarily gulped, goggling.